We have a question and answer session now. And the first question, dear Lumpur, when a person has not obtained samadhi, can you please advise how and when one should investigate the body and sense of self, namely the 5 khandhas? Well, the development of our practice of the Noble Eightfold Path is not bound by time and place. The Dhamma is akaliko, so even if you haven't attained deep states of samadhi or stillness in your practice, don't despair, because you can bring up the Dhamma, one aspect or another, at any time. So say you've asked when should one investigate the body? Right here, right now, maybe your mind is not particularly peaceful at the moment, but you can still pay attention to your breathing, part of the body. Notice how coarse or refined your breath is, how long and short the breath is, how quick, how slow it is. You can investigate your breath at any time of day or night. You can just take a few deep breaths and already you're bringing your mind back to your body when you do that. And you can notice things around your body and pay attention to your body at any time. Say like eating food, noticing the chewing and the process of eating. Bathing is a very important time to contemplate. Every day or every time you bathe, you're having to bathe your body because it smells with sweat and dirt and grease. You have to wash your hair if you have any. You have to clean this body because it naturally oozes unpleasant substances. You go to the toilet, everything. That's a whole contemplation in itself, and you don't have to be in deep samadhi to do that. You can just observe and pay attention to your body any time, any day, and in these very ordinary experiences. Contemplate the changing nature of the body. It's impermanent, it's aging. With aging, your hair changes, it drops out, it grows, it drops out, changes colour. Skin is always changing. All kinds of physical changes you can observe in your body through aging, and that you can investigate any time. And the mental khandhas, you can also bring your mind to pay attention to them when you have a moment. You can be observing feelings, pleasant, unpleasant, or neither pleasant nor unpleasant. And particularly when you're mindful of feeling, even if only for a few moments, you don't have a deep samadhi experience, you're not meditating, but you can just notice feelings arising, passing away through the day. A painful feeling, when you bring mindfulness to that, you're noticing a feeling as just a feeling, rather than jumping in and reacting to it with a lot of thoughts and emotions, and you start to observe the conditioning process of the mind, how feeling comes up. So you feel pleasure, and that produces a whole lot of mental formations, thoughts, together with perceptions associated with that pleasant feeling. You have an unpleasant feeling, that will have its own perceptions and thought formations. And you can observe the changing nature of feeling and then perception and then thought. And you can observe the selfless, conditioned nature of mental phenomena. So as an experiment, sometimes you could do something that's pleasant, but you're consciously observing how engaging in this pleasant activity brings pleasant feeling, pleasurable feeling to you. When you stop that activity, the pleasant feeling stops. It's a conditioned thing. You can observe that, and just the same with painful experience. When the conditions are correct, you get pain. When those conditions change, pain stops. So you can't say the pain or the pleasure is a self. That's a delusion, the add-on to the experience. You can do that any time in your day. You're just sitting here, say, sitting for a while, listening to this talk or chanting, meditating, and then after a while you get some pain in your leg. That's an expression or a manifestation of not self, because you've been sitting for a long time, pressure on the muscle, on the blood vessels, you start to get pain arising through the nervous system. There's causes and conditions for that painful feeling to arise. What we normally do is say, that's me, that's my leg, I hurt, I want to move my leg. And you may move your leg, that's fine, but before you move your leg, just reflect, this is a set of causes and conditions coming up. And you're moving your leg to relieve yourself of the pain, but that pain doesn't belong to anyone, it's coming through causes and conditions. You move your leg, the pain fades away. It's gone. It's temporary. And so on and so forth. At any time in your day you can investigate these 5 khandhas, 5 aggregates. Observe the changing, impermanent nature of them. You can observe the dukkha of them. They're unsatisfactory, unable to bring you lasting happiness. They're unreliable. Because things change, they're constantly fading away, degenerating. They don't last. The body is changing, it won't last forever. It's impermanent. You eat food and you feel good, and then after a while you've digested your food and you feel hungry again. You feel hot, you feel cold, you feel energetic, you feel tired. You can think of something very nice and then suddenly another thought pops into your mind that it's unpleasant. Constantly seeing the unsatisfactory nature of the khandhas, their dukkha, unreliable. Eventually we have to get old, sick and we die. And the 5 khandhas, they say, they break apart at death. So they're impermanent, they're dukkha, and you can't stop that happening, so they're not self. You can't control them. You can reflect on the 5 khandhas by looking outwardly at other people and their experience, what you see and notice in others. You can look inwards at your own khandhas. And I'd recommend to do this sometimes. You may not have deep states of samadhi and you may not have much time to develop meditation, but you can certainly, when you've got a free moment, you can contemplate your 5 khandhas. Any aspect of life, you can see it as Dhamma, what you might call Dhamma anupassana, reflecting on the Dhamma in your experience rather than just reacting with craving, clinging, delusion. So there's always something that can teach us from our experience. We have to incline our minds to the Dhamma, and even if you don't have much samadhi and you find meditation difficult, you can still develop wisdom and understanding through doing this. Another question. And to what level of investigation can this be achieved without samadhi? As I understand, this is only conceptual level and not experiencing level, so to speak. Well, samadhi has to come from somewhere, doesn't it? States of stillness, mindfulness, continuously practiced, developed, becomes samadhi, a state of calm, stillness of mind, firmness of mind. Samadhi has its factors, what we call initial application, putting the mind on an object, sustained application, keeping it on the object, piti, the rapture, the joy that arises, sukha, happiness, ekaggata, one-pointedness. These are the factors of samadhi. And these can be developed at any time, and they can come out of paying attention to the Dhamma, contemplating the Dhamma. Sometimes wisdom, we say wisdom develops samadhi. So sometimes you may have a theme of Dhamma that just grabs your attention. It can come up spontaneously, or you develop it consciously as a meditation, or you're just you're sitting sometime when you're free, you've got some moment, you're walking or you're sitting somewhere and you just contemplate some aspect of Dhamma, and your mind can become very calm through that. You don't have to label your state of calm as a state of samadhi, but you can just notice when you contemplate Dhamma, it brings your mind in line with the truth. You become more calm within yourself. Maybe these factors of samadhi start to come up. You could be contemplating some of the good things you've done, the dana you've offered, or keeping precepts, or helping somebody. You could contemplate the qualities of the Buddha. And you're just using information you've got in your mind, memory, thoughts, stringing them together with some mindfulness and some developing a theme of Dhamma. And you might find that the mind becomes very calm and absorbed into that, and becomes quite peaceful for a while. Of course, you are developing mindfulness and then one-pointedness of samadhi, because that's what helps you to break through the conceptualization of the mind and to see and know, or you might say witness experience from a place of stillness, where all the discursive thinking has gone quiet, the doubting, the worrying, the desiring, the wanting, the aversion, the sleepiness, these 5 hindrances. When there is samadhi, those 5 hindrances fade away, so the mind is in a very clear, peaceful state. But that can be developed partly through developing wisdom and insight, contemplating things, questioning things, observing impermanence, helping you to let go of the hindrances. So wisdom can lead into samadhi, or sometimes you just pick your one object and you're working with that, the breath, for example, and as the mind's energy gathers together with the breath, you have a state of calm arise, and then from there you contemplate. But we need to calm the mind, to release it from the endless thinking, conceptualization, as you say. Because normally we're stuck on that level, we're always thinking, reacting to things with attraction, aversion, with interest, with boredom. We're always thinking the next thought, the next plan, the next activity, what am I going to do? What should I do? Where should I go? We're stuck in the thinking mind with all the concepts and ideas for much of the time. So sometimes we need to take a step back from that, detach from that, and that's where the practice of mindfulness and samadhi helps us to step back, detach from the endless thinking. And you get a rest, and your mind is brighter and clearer, so that it can look back at itself and the mental phenomena in the mind, coming up in the mind, and then also physical experience from a place of clarity and stillness, rather than being caught up in it all the time. Most of the time we're just endlessly thinking, so it's very hard to separate the quality of knowing from the thought. We are our thoughts, we become our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions. We're so stuck into them, we're so caught up in them that it's very difficult to get any perspective on them and see them as they really are, as impermanent, as not self. just keep going. This is how we all practice. Little by little we're developing clarity and insight through our efforts. And the more you do it, the more you'll gain experience in how to do it and how to keep this state of clarity for longer. Another question. When your child has a serious illness and may die before you do, how do you cope with this? Well, that sounds like a very difficult thing to cope with. Must be one of the most hardest things for a parent to consider is the fact that your child, maybe they have a terminal illness or at least some illness that may shorten their life. It must be a terrible thing to have to face. The more normal thing usually is that children or the offspring of parents have to face the death of their parents first. So, terrible suffering to have to face the death of your child. But we have to use the Dhamma to deal with these things, and we have to accept the reality of whatever's happening in our life. So if your child has some terrible illness or degenerative disease or cancer, whatever it may be, what do they need? They need love, and they need support. And the best way to do that is for you to adjust your mind to the truth, the reality, accept the reality, and develop your own inner qualities of love, steadiness of mind, understanding and acceptance, so that you can give that to them, I would say. Because a parent and a child are so closely bonded usually that if you're caught into endless worry and stress and anxiety about the state of your child's health, if you're not careful, that will pass on to them. They'll see that, they'll hear that, they'll feel it. And that's going to make their situation worse. So the more effort you can put into calming your own mind to accept a very difficult situation, the more you can help your child, I would say. So, if you do have any experience with meditation, mindfulness practice, that's going to help. Listening to the Dhamma is going to help. Doing things that help to uplift you in this difficult time when you're facing the death or the onset of a disease with your child, the more you can do to help your mind remain in a wholesome, good state, then that's going to help you to deal with and help your own child better. Maybe, the more you can focus on each day, the present moment, rather than always worrying about the future or regretting the past. That's a big thing. Focusing on the present moment as much as possible and getting them to do that as well, so they're not weighed down by the thought of what might happen in the future. There's the uncertainty as well. We never know what's going to happen for sure, so why spend so much time worrying and being anxious about something that hasn't happened yet? That's increasing the suffering of the situation, which is already a tough situation. So focus more on the present moment, what is good in the present moment, what you can find that's good in the present. Good in yourself, good in your child, good in the situation. Focus on the good. Focus on what you have rather than what you're going to lose or what may happen in the future. And you can still have your love and your good relationship, and you can focus on all kinds of good, beautiful, good, happy things in this world, in this life, if you make that effort rather than letting the depression, the despair drag you down. And it's not easy, but this is what we have to do, is work on uplifting and protecting the mind rather than letting it be dragged down by the fear and the anxiety based on your child's condition. And of course you can encourage them in the same way if they're anxious and afraid. In the time of the Buddha, there's the lady Kisa Gotami who had the baby who died, and she couldn't accept it. She walked around the village wailing and crying and sad that she'd lost her son, but she couldn't accept her baby was dead, so she was kind of deluding herself that it was just asleep. And she was looking for someone to give her some medicine that might revive her child, just in this kind of vain hope of a miracle. And eventually someone told her to go to see the Buddha. And she went to the Buddha and he said, "Yeah, I can help you. I know there's a way to help you. There's some medicine your child can use." And she said, "Yeah, what medicine can that be?" He said, "Well, you have to get some mustard seeds." And she said, "Oh, that's good. I can get that very easily. Every household has mustard seed." And the Buddha said, "Yeah, but you've got to get mustard seed from a house where no child has ever died, or no body has ever died." And the woman at first thought, "Well, there's bound to be at least one house like that." So she started walking from house to house asking, "Have you got any mustard seed?" "Yep." "Has anyone ever died here?" "Oh, this person died, uncle or auntie or parent or child." She walked around the whole village and found everyone had mustard seed, but there wasn't a single household where no one had died. So gradually it dawns on her and she accepts the fact that death is natural and normal. It's not what we want, but it is part of life. Even children, unfortunately, die sometimes. So she went back to the Buddha, realizing that she had to accept the loss of her son. So, very difficult situation. I sympathize with you, but we have to try and adjust our mind. The old cliche, think positive, focus on the good things, and work from there. Another question. I have a scale deciding the values of things I offer to people. Also based on the closeness of the individual, I make offerings too. I wonder, is this the stinginess hiding inside the act of offering? So if I understand correct, you have a scale. So that means you have a group of family or friends and you get this, but you only get this. Yes. Who gets the big one, who gets the small one, who gets the nice one, who gets the worse one. I would say definitely there's some stinginess and attachment lurking in there, some preferences, some biases of mind. And this is understandable. We have people we like, people we are neutral towards, and then people we don't like, in our family, in our friends, in our world. And that's one of the reasons we're practicing, isn't it? To overcome these biases that are an expression of greed, anger, delusion, self-view. And it's one reason we practice dana, isn't it? To overcome this. But even as we do practice dana, generosity, the biases can slip in. This is why the Buddha said Sangha dana is the most powerful kind of Dhamma. Dana, generosity. Because when you practice generosity, which we call Sangha dana, you're offering to support Sangha, all Sangha. The newest, the oldest, the most attained, the least attained, the wisest, the most unwise, all of them. And Sangha, if they're practicing properly, they keep precepts, they're dedicated to practicing for liberation, for Nibbana, which is a very pure intention which we want to support, and we incline to ourselves. So you practice Sangha dana, you're not choosing who your offering is going to. You say, this is for the Sangha, as they feel fit, as they see best to use, whoever needs it, or can benefit from it, good. The alternative is what we call individual dana, patipukalika dana, which means just specifying a person. That could be one monk or nun that you offer to, and it's still dana, it's still good, but you're narrowing down your mind then, so maybe there's more opportunity for attachment, stinginess to come in. And that can be the same for people, friends, family. You can give the one you love lots of gifts, or anything they want they can have, and then the one you hate, you give the tiniest, smallest, minimum. So you have to work on that. So maybe you have to reverse things around sometimes, reverse your scale, so the person you least like, you give the best gift, if you can, and then the person you like the most, you give the most ordinary gift. And you teach yourself to let go of some of these biases. Another question. When I see my elderly parents lie to keep more money, especially when they are very wealthy, I feel averse towards their unskillful behavior, as well as the lack of hiriotapa. I know I don't have to be upset about others' behavior, but I still get influenced. What should I do to be less effective? Forgive them. We have to forgive each other our imperfections, our blemishes, our kilesas. If they're your parents, then just forgive them. Depending on the kind of lie, there's sort of simple, minor kind of lies, and then there's big lies, aren't there? So some lies are very significant, some are kind of passing lies. They're still lies, but their consequences are maybe not quite so extreme. So try to forgive them, but maybe if you can find a way to get them to hear the Dhamma, that explains the benefits of sila, honesty, not lying, and all the other good qualities that come from practicing Dhamma, developing generosity, kindness, compassion, tolerance, patience, mindfulness, effort, all the good things that will help them to grow and see their own mind, see their intentions, and maybe abandon some of the unwholesome intentions that might lead them to lie, or the attachments that lead them to lie. Good if you can do that. So this is what the Buddha encourages us to do with our parents, is try to establish them in faith in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, which will lead on to them actually practicing the Dhamma, practicing generosity, keeping precepts, developing mindfulness, listening to Dhamma, reflecting on Dhamma, developing insight. Anything you can do to support that, so getting them to listen to Dhamma talks, even getting them to a place where they can practice Dhamma, if only briefly, is good. But you only do what you can, can't you? So don't let their behavior, like you say, drag your mind down. You do your best to encourage them and help them, but then you also have to get on with your own practice. And sometimes if you get on with your own practice, that can also have a good effect on them, because you learn more yourself from your own practice, how to deal with the mind that wants to lie, or is stingy, or is attached, and all the other kilesas of anger and confusion and fear and anxiety and greed and all of these. If you're learning to deal with them yourself, you're getting more understanding, you're more peaceful, more patient, more tolerant in yourself. That can maybe have a good effect on them as well. It may take time, but it can only help. So whatever you can do to support them, you don't have to support their lies, but support them in other ways, and hopefully they can come to understand deeper Dhamma over time. Another question. It is still hard for me to relate to why the Buddha compared sanya, sankhara and vijnana as a mirage, a plantain trunk and a conjurer's trick. These three things all mean the same empty illusion for me, so I can't understand why they were separately used for the three different things. Well, the Buddha was very good at giving similes and metaphors for the Dhamma to help paint pictures and show people things that are difficult to see. I mean, mental khandhas, mental qualities are very difficult to see because they're invisible to the eye. You have to know them through the intellect and then through mindfulness and the wisdom of the mind. And, these are just ways to help us see. Like the plantain trunk, I quite like that. You unwrap endless thoughts and there's nothing there. Like you unwrap the banana tree, plantain tree, it's just layers, like an onion or any of these plants that are just layers of skin or flesh. You unwrap it and there's nothing there. And thought is like that. Thought is just thought. It's just a few words, images, concepts strung together, but there's nothing substantial there. And when you unpeel it, it collapses. It's different from, say, a hardwood tree still standing when you take the bark off. So I think that's quite a good one for myself. That's quite helpful. But and then perception is a mirage. The very thing that the Buddha is a mirage. Like you are in the desert, it's hot, and you see the oasis that is not an oasis. And you don't have to be in the desert. Say in Australia here, you see it in the hot sun. You'll see the shining, shimmering image on the road ahead of you, and it looks like there's water there, but there's not. It's just a shimmering image. But your mind immediately says water. Perception is, how you interpret what you see or hear or taste, touch, smell, how you label it, interpret it, what you put onto that experience. And that is like a mirage because it's tricking you. Because you can see something as good, you think it's good, and then you get to experience it and you realise it wasn't as good as you thought. It was different than you thought. It may be bad, it may be pleasant, it may be unpleasant, it may be one thing and it's another. And we do this all the time, don't we? We mistake our experience. We jump to conclusions about people and places and things, and our memories trick us, and we remember something as good that was not so good, or something as bad but it was actually better, or we put our perception onto something that causes us suffering because we attach to that perception and we haven't seen it as impermanent, as not self. So some people, a lot of our fears and suffering are coming from perceptions, or misperceptions. So maybe there's somebody you don't really know and you think this person is really scary, aggressive, powerful person who could hurt me, but they may actually be very pleasant, friendly person who's no threat to you at all. But you've added this perception onto them and believed it. Or the opposite, somebody could be very soft and easygoing, but actually they're inside you, they're out to get you. Or you could be in the dark, and because the dark you can't see anything, people tend to add all kinds of perceptions onto the dark, and you say it's scary because there could be a bogeyman or some ghost or some horrible thing in the dark. But maybe there's not, it's just you're imagining that because it's dark and you can't see what's there. Or whatever, we do this all the time. in the forest here we have these big spiders called huntsmen that everybody hates because they're big and hairy and they look frightening and they move fast. And they come into your kuti and you sort of, what am I going to do now? The spider's here and you can't go to sleep at night because it's sitting there on the wall right next to you. What do you do? What do you do? I've been seeing these spiders for 40 years now and I still haven't had a problem with them. I'm not saying nobody's ever had a problem. Maybe somebody was bitten by one or caused them trouble, but because they don't look nice. What is that? They don't look nice. It's your perception. You add on to it, and so you say, "Oh, I hate this." And people try and catch them, and they jump onto you because they're smart. They go towards the thing that's threatening them because they know they're going to freak you out. You go and try and catch it, it jumps on you, and you see these grown men, like these 6'6" monks, go, "Ah!" It's just a little spider who you could squash in an instant, but hopefully you don't. That's perception, isn't it? It's like that. It creates the scary, the lovable, the good, the bad. It's a mirage. What was the other one? Oh, a conjurer's trick. Yeah, well, sense consciousness is a conjurer's trick, isn't it? It's just one way of describing it. You could probably think up your own simile, that's your choice. Try and think of a different way of describing sense consciousness, but one moment you're looking, one moment you're hearing, and it seems to us like it's all happening at the same time, but as you practice mindfulness and investigate more closely, you can see there's distinct moments. It's impossible to see and hear exactly at the same time. You're hearing, you're seeing, tasting, smelling. And this is why we can ignore things. So you're listening to your headphones, whatever, and something's happening right next to you, and you miss it because you're focused on the sound, or you're tasting something and you don't see or hear something. One sense will blot out the other senses for a while, and they're just moving around and they come up very quickly. Sense contact is the result of our past karma, and you can't really control it. We try to control it and just get pleasant sense contact all the time, but it's impossible. So it'll sneak up or spontaneously pop up on you because of karma. So you get pleasant sounds and sights and tastes and smells and touches, and then you get unpleasant ones, and they alternate and they sneaking on each other, and they come up when you didn't expect it. So it's almost like a magician. It's just constantly fooling you, and as you investigate it more, you're seeing more the process. Well, there's eye, there's light, and you see. Sense contact arises and you pay attention to it, and you get seeing consciousness. So it starts, as you investigate it, unravels or reveals the trick. Just like when you have a conjurer's trick and you find out how it was done, it's like, oh, now I know. It doesn't fool you anymore. Sense consciousness can be unraveled in that way as you investigate it. So it's up to you, what similes and metaphors and comparisons you make for these. It's just the Buddha trying to help us see what is, or know what is difficult to know, because it's mental activity. And you have to investigate for yourself. And if you practice some mindfulness meditation, that will help. And ultimately, they're empty of self. They arise, they pass away. There's no self in them. They don't exist on their own. They come into existence based on causes and conditions. That's another investigation. So that allows you to not grasp at them and cling to them when you see the not self in them. This is what we mean by emptiness. These 5 khandhas are empty of self. It doesn't mean to say there's nothing there. It's just there's no abiding self in it. There's a question here. Somebody's asking for advice. I was awoken by a dream, and it was one of a recurrent theme of loss and confusion over a person and events. I've had these dreams come up randomly every few months for about a decade, even though the thoughts of the event and the person hardly comes up in my daily life. I don't know if this is the right way to make sense of this, but I have been thinking about how memories are stored not only in the brain, but also all over the cells in our body. E.g., I've heard stories from people who have received organ transplants. And I think there might be a lot of strong emotional memory imprints stuck in the organs or parts of my body, which is why it surfaces when I'm asleep. My question is, how can I release or untie these knots during meditation? I think it is important to resolve this, because if I was to suddenly die, my concern is that this imprint is so strong that it might come up and pull me into that stream. Well, our mind, consciousness, is impressionable. Through the senses we remember things and they condition the mind, and they also re-emerge, as I was just saying, what we call vibhaka karma, resultant karma. So you have an event and then later you remember the event, and it can trigger memories, further emotional reactions, because our mind is impressionable. It absorbs information through the senses, and we can remember, and we have perceptions which condition the mind. So if you've had a particularly strong experience with a person, certain events, it may leave something that's unresolved in your consciousness, stream of consciousness. There's an attachment, a clinging based on the memory and how we perceive that event and that person. So even though it can be 10 years, you may still be harboring aversion or fear or guilt or love. Even if you haven't seen them, but the memory is still there and it's been a strong impression on your mind, so it can come up. And when does it come up? Well, in normal daily life we're often mentally busy doing work, going here, going there. The mind is focused more on the immediate events and sense contact. But then when you're quiet, and it could be in meditation, or it could be when you're falling asleep, waking up, that's when we have dreams, or sometimes images that can be coming from a long time ago popping up, and they can trigger emotional reactions from the past. So I'd say really this is stored in your mind, or the stream of your mind, stream of consciousness, rather than the physical body. Of course the mind attaches or identifies to your body, so it seems like maybe this is in the body, in the organs, in the cells. But it's really just consciousness, and mind is attached to the cells, the organs, as me, mine, myself. Really, as more you meditate, the more you establish mindfulness, investigate, you might recognize or see more clearly that rupa and nama, or physicality, mentality, are separate. They're linked, they're related, and mind attaches to the body, and that's part of our problem. We attach to the body as self, but they're not the same thing. And so I'd say really it's the mind that is being influenced by the past, by relations to other people, things that have happened, good and bad, memories, and that's still left its impression. You would call it an attachment, part of yourself, who you are and who you think you are and who you feel you are. So when those memories come up, that's what you have to investigate, bring up more mindfulness to see this is a memory, this is a perception, it's impermanent, it's unsatisfactory, it's not self. And if you can have enough mindfulness, investigate and see that, then you can let it go. and you're reducing its impressionability on the mind, its impact on the mind, and maybe in the end you just know it's just a memory and you let it go. Or the feeling it brings with it is just a feeling and you let it go. And this is one of the miracles, the good things of meditation, is that it can help you do that, resolve past suffering from past events that you're still carrying in your mind, or it's still conditioning your mind. It can do that. Sometimes you don't need to consciously investigate it. Sometimes your aim should be just make your mind mindful and still, samadhi. One of the amazing things of samadhi is it kind of flows to where it's needed. And that's physically. Sometimes it flows to help the body heal a little bit, improve our immune system and the healing processes. And it flows to where it needs to heal itself in the mind, because samadhi is very pure. It's not nibbana, but it's a very pure state where the hindrances have gone quiet and the kilesas have gone quiet. So that very positive energy, there's piti, sukha, there's one point in this, has a healing effect on the mind. So maybe you have an old traumatic or unpleasant thing from the past that keeps coming up in dreams or just memories. Occasionally you think of it. But when you're in samadhi, the mind's energy gathers together and it really wants to drop those things, because the mind naturally is inclining towards peace, stillness, purity, happiness. So then when it encounters those memories again, there's sometimes just an automatic letting go. You can see it's just a thought, it's just a memory. And we say your practice of vipassana coming out of samadhi is much better than before you have samadhi. So it can quite naturally help you to let some of those things go, and your mind adjusts to the reality and knowing that this is the past, it's just a memory, it's just a bit of old karma that comes up, but you don't attach to it anymore, so you drop it, you let it go quite quickly. Also, it can give you the wisdom, so even if you're not yet letting go of the past and your reactions and emotions based on the past events that come up, it may give you the wisdom to see what you need to do. So maybe you need to develop more kindness and compassion to yourself, or if there's a person that you've had a traumatic, bad experience with, once you establish mindfulness, you become more calm. You can see this is somebody I need to forgive, have compassion for, cultivate compassion, direct it to them, send it to the memory of that person. If you're not meeting them anymore, you send it to their memory, and you're healing your own mind so that it's not dwelling on guilt, anger, aversion towards that person anymore. Just see them as someone you wish well and wish them well, and they can get on with their life, you get on with your life. So meditation has a very healing effect, both physically, mentally. Sometimes it's very automatic, natural. Sometimes you have to work at it and bring up certain qualities to help the process along. You direct your samadhi to practice compassion or forgiveness and let it go. But I'd recommend that's the way to go. And so it's not, organ transplant. Well, I'd say probably it's the consciousness, the ghost maybe of the dead person that you've received the organ from, probably following along, rather than the organ itself. It's the attachment of some other being to that organ. But I wouldn't think too much about these things. Again, you just develop your own mindfulness and compassion, share merits with all beings in the past, the present, and don't get too anxious about organs, organ transplants. So, those are today's questions. Hopefully given you some help there. And we'll leave it for next time and wish you well.